Laura Jean Shannon, you designed all of the super suits on The Boys, and season 3 was a big one because we finally meet Soldier Boy. So when did the process for that costume begin?
So I just have to correct really quickly. I designed most of the super suits on The Boys. However, Michael Ground, who's our phenomenal costume designer and my brother from another mother, does do some of the day players, which there were plenty of this season. But yes, Soldier Boy was our big new guy on the scene. The process started long before anybody even knew it was happening, because Eric Kripke, our showrunner, and I are sort of connected at the hip, and he fills me in early days on characters that he's thinking about, even sometimes before he gets into the writer's room, and he draws me into the process early on to start sharing visuals with him to inspire actually the creation of all of the characters, which is one of the really exceptionally fun things about working with him and working on The Boys. So we started in early days putting together our mood boards for the character, sort of Marlboro Man meets, soldier meets superhero, and really dug into sort of the history of the character.
Mm-hmm. How familiar were you with the comics version beforehand?
So one of the things about The Boys that's really fun is that we have these crazy graphic novels, by Garth Ennis. And so we do like to tap into each of those characters in terms of early research. And I like to pull enough of the DNA from those characters that the fans of the books, really feel the energy of that character while putting our own stamp on it. So there's actually several versions of Soldier Boy in the books. And we took mainly a color scheme and a few of his iconic sort of visuals, an eagle, a star. And we made sure that we, kept a shield as part of his whole kind of look, and then we sort of lobbed that into this realm where it also became a weapon.
Mm-hmm. I love that you just shrunk the eagle and like had it emblazoned over, I guess it's kind of like a chest shield. It's like utilitarian.
Yeah, with Soldier Boy, we really wanted to lay into the soldier aspect of it. So and the other thing about him is he was a superstar superhero way back in the day, kind of after that sort of, tights wearing era of superhero, and before now this sort of muscle bound era of like very tightly fitted super suits. He was in this little sweet spot where his pieces are actually a little bit looser fitting, more like BDUs that you'd find on a soldier. And so he also has that tactical vest that has the iconic eagle logo that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels a lot more like militaristic than like the graphics version, which is like blue and it's like shorts.
Well, one of the things that we do on the show, sorry to interrupt, is we really ground our characters. So, the humor in our project really comes from the writing and the acting, and also just sort of like really looking at reality in a way that is truth is stranger than fiction, right? And so we ground all of our characters and create sort of a legit superhero universe that's also part of an actual world that we live in. So there's no magic, in our world. That's just technology. So even what creates the superheroes is something that was created through science, and it's just manifests itself with superpowers. So the only thing that's sort of fantastical in our project is the superpowers themselves. Otherwise, everything else we do, we really try to, get grounded and gritty. And you can even see in a character like Soldier Boy, for instance, that there's intrinsic battle scars and wear on his super suit to really, drive home that whole sort of idea that these are real people in the real world, really having, powers that they then use in combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because it also, like, not just his, but all of them, even if they're kind of surreal, like it still feels practical, like they're walking around in the world. And that, yeah.
Yay, we did it.
Well, I love the green and red accent color scheme that you guys landed on it. So how did you land on it? Like,
Yeah, dude, let me tell you something. Green and red, not being Christmas and being badass is a challenge,
it was, because you also have to, you don't really see the red at first too. You have to look for it. So
yeah, well, thank you. That's thanks to our fabulous textile artists who, gave it its sculptural paint job, which is always the chef's kiss of every super suit. And yeah, I mean, honestly, the green and the red was an amalgam of reasons why we chose that. One being that actually there is a version of him in the books that is green and red, as opposed to the blue, red, white, and blue version. Also, Homelanders, got the corner on the market of red, white, and blue. So we always look at all of our characters panoramically, and it's really important to make sure that we're not stepping on the toes of the other characters, because you see them all together quite often, whether it be on a poster or in the show. So it's important that each one of them has their own sort of visual language. And so the red and the green was something that wasn't taken by any of our other superheroes, and also does harken back to one of the original versions of him from source material from canon. But we definitely worked hard to heighten and customize the colors. So for instance, the base green fabric that we use for him is sort of a deep green that has a bit of a brightness to it, that we then actually high density screen printed a 3-dimensional star pattern in like an olive that has a bit of a sparkle to it. So it brings it down to an olive drab a little bit more, with just a little bit extra life. And then the light catches it in a way that, really kicks in a lot of the dark settings that we knew he was going to be in over the course of the season. And then the reds, we actually started with a fairly bright red, which gives us a lot of room then to give it that sculptural paint job I had mentioned, so that you have that brightness sort of emanating from within, but really it's greased up and oiled up and dirtied up with battle scars and all kinds of fun and excitement, so that you don't even notice that it's red right off the bat.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jensen Ackles, who plays Soldier Boy, he was on Seth Meyers last year, and he said during your first fitting, he asked if you would be adding muscle padding into the costume, and you told him you're going to bring me some muscles in April.
Yes, I think the direct quote was, "No, babe, you got to bring those guns." And he did. He was amazing. First of all, love Jensen Ackles. What a sweetheart. Also, his mama raised him right. I know all the other costume designers here know of what I speak. He would hang his costume at the end of the day. Never was there a sock astray on the floor in the fitting room. So for any actors that might be watching, great pointers. But yeah, he was great and a lot of fun. And that's part of the fun of designing superhero costumes with our actors, is that it really is a different process. I mean, it's very similar in that we're creating characters together, and my job is to, make sure that they're really comfortable when they walk into my fitting room, and provide them whatever they need to, really find the character. But they come in after we've already worked with our executive producers and the studios and the networks designing the super suits. So they come in to seeing themselves, on concept art, like as the character, and pretty much 10 times out of 10, they get really fired up and jazzed. Like, it's an exciting thing.
Yeah, because who doesn't want to be a superhero? So
right. But every single part of the process is custom. Every single stitch, I mean, every fabric, every sculpted element is customized to them specifically. We start by doing a scan of their bodies, and everything is customized to them. So it is like minimum six fitting process. So it's a bit of a commitment, and it was during COVID, and he has a family. So, that added to the challenge, but he was such a good sport, and he really did his homework. He showed up, and he had, muscle tone, and we were able to, really capitalize on that. Because,
it's challenge accepted. So
there's very few people that don't have a muscle suit, just, for in case anybody was wondering. Almost every person has a muscle suit under their super suit.
Awesome. Well, LJ, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Denise Wingate, costume designer for Daisy Jones and the Six. I know you're a huge fan of the book and you really wanted to work on the show. So what was it about the book that spoke to you?
Just for some reason, I just really loved the book. I just got taken with the story, and I love that era. I love the period. And I was shooting in New Orleans, and there was a hurricane, so we were on lockdown in our hotels, and I read it in one sitting. And the producer, Mike Nelson, sent it to me. He said, "I think you'll really love this. Read it and tell me what you think." And I put the book down and said, "You got to get me in the room. I love this so much. I really want to do it." It felt like something that was perfect for me, being born and raised in LA. I had styled with a band, had been on the road. So it just felt very natural to me. It just felt like the perfect project I could get creative with.
Mm-hmm. So while you were reading it, were you already coming with ideas and like jotting down designs and notes of like how
the first time I read it, I just read it all the way through, just as a reader. And then when I realized I had some time in New Orleans on this other film, I started putting images together. And because the book read like a documentary, I really wanted it to look realistic. So I started watching documentaries and gathering images and watching footage from concerts of that period. So I created a visual book based on the book, and made my own giant visual portfolio. And that's what I took in for my very first meeting with Hello Sunshine. And I think that they were blown away that I did so much. They couldn't believe it. The whole movie was there in this book.
So how much from that book wound up on the show? Like how many of those designs? And
Taylor Jenkins Reid was very, very descriptive in a lot of scenes. And I felt that the fans were expecting certain things. And for those of you who haven't read the book or seen the show, there are specific outfits that she describes. And I felt that if we didn't do that, the fans would really, really be let down. And I just didn't want to let anybody down. I know I would be expecting it. So those specific items we worked with, but then the actors all brought in their own characters to the show, which was great. So we could build different characters.
Yeah, because she described the oversized men's shirt.
That was something that she described. We had to do it because it was in the script. There's dialogue surrounding it, and we just had to do it. And the same thing, there's a beautiful, it says in the book, an ornately beaded Halston caftan that she goes in the water with, and at the Chateau Marmont, which we had to build 3 of these intricately hand beaded, beautiful caftans to go in the water. So stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to
go ahead.
Riley was very, very collaborative, and all the actors were actually. I had done all the research for them, so by the time they came to see me, a lot like what LJ was saying, I had done all the research. I had boards and boards of who I thought their characters were, so it gave them a jumping point, and they could say, "I really like this. I like this. Let's try this." So I felt like I had just done so much research, so I think it was helpful.
Mm-hmm. Did you have like real life artists in mind for each of them? Like obviously Daisy, like the avatars, like Stevie Nicks, and we really see that in the finale with that gorgeous gold, like flowy caftan dress.
Yeah, and that was her actually. I mean, it early, because it spans quite a bit of time, and the actors play themselves young, so we really had to make them look young with the clothing and the hair and makeup. So when Daisy was young, I really was drawn to young Linda Ronstadt when she was because she was really young, and she was just a powerhouse, but she was always wearing these short shorts and cowboy boots, and she was awesome. And watching footage of her in interviews, she was really amazing. And then she morphed into more of a Stevie Nicks. But she's the one for that final scene. We were trying to figure out what would really stand out. And she called me one day and said, "Gold Dust Woman. I'm listening to Gold Dust Woman. Let's do something like that." So once we had that idea, then we could find the perfect outfit. It took a while. We tried many different versions, but that was a Halston, gold lame caftan that we cut down the middle and made into a cape. It was pretty fabulous. And then for Suki, who plays Karen, we did a lot of Joan Jett, Patti Smith, Susie Quattro. So it was a little more glam, a little more.
Yeah, and she also it feels like tougher because she's the only girl in the band for a while until Daisy comes along too.
Yeah, and in the book, she's a little more androgynous. We played with that, and I used a lot of Mark Bolan from T-Rex, a little more of a glam androgynous look. So much fun.
Mhm. I love Daisy's coats. She has a lot of great coats. Some fur collars, and then obviously the fur coat on the album cover. So where did you source all of those coats?
Where didn't I source? I sourced everywhere. I mean, I bought that one coat that she wears in the end. I bought online from a store in Paris, and I mean, we rented some. And Pal's Costumes had some amazing coats. I went to flea markets every single weekend for a year, every Saturday, every Sunday. The vendors knew me. They didn't know what I was doing because I don't think it was on anybody's radar. They didn't care, but they knew I was looking for specific 70s things. So every weekend I would see what they had. I made some beautiful coats. I think people may have read in the press before. I found this woman who had made jumpsuits for Elvis, who is Riley's grandfather. And she made beautiful rock and roll clothes in the 70s. And she was still around in San Francisco. So she made 2 beautiful coats for me. I had her custom make those. So I had the time because of COVID to really, really source beautiful things. And I don't think we intentionally were thinking about using so many coats, but I just kept finding so many fabulous ones, and they're good for like a quick pop getting off the tour bus. They're just so dramatic and fabulous. And then we figured it was like armor for her, that she could be wearing these big coats and protect herself emotionally.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when she goes to Greece, it's a completely different style. Still like a lot of flowing dresses and caftans. So what was it like designing those looks for that?
That was amazing. That was, I mean, because it was such a different, we'd been on the show for 2 years at that point, and it was such a departure for her. And it was at the end of the show, and I found some beautiful pieces. I ended up breaking my ankle in Greece in my costume shop. So I had to finish the show in a wheelchair. But besides that, it was really difficult. I had to get to set on a mule. But I had a really, really great seamstress there. She was from Poland, and she was amazing. And she was just, I would find these beautiful fabrics, and she was just making stuff left and right. It was fantastic because I didn't really have a proper workshop because of COVID. I had a seamstress who I love, who made some beautiful pieces for me. I mean, she was making pieces all the time, but she wasn't even allowed in the fitting room, and we didn't have a workshop. So I would send her things and have to send fabric. It was really difficult. That part was difficult. And I wish I would have had a proper workshop. We could have been making stuff, nonstop. But
and like you hadn't broken your foot either, so
that was that. Yeah, and then I was like, I'm finishing this show. It's been 2 years. I don't care if I have to limp across the finish line.
Yeah.
So that made it difficult, but it was beautiful, like beautiful to shoot there.
Yeah, well, like you were saying, there's like the show is set in so many time periods. You have 60s Pittsburgh, 70s LA, and then obviously the documentaries in the 90s. So how did you want to show their evolving style through every period, especially in the doc? Because we don't really see a lot of their outfits, especially the final shot with like Daisy answering the door. We don't see like their full outfit. So how do you want to still show, they're older now, but there's still like a little piece of what you've seen before?
And my whole goal was not to have the costumes be noticed at all because of that, because you don't really want to say too much with the costumes. And I didn't want it to be distracting, because you really need to focus on the words and what they're saying. And there's no words at the end of the movie. You just want it to be her face and the emotion on her face. So for me, anything we could do to keep a blank canvas and make it disappear. I think, the best costumes are the ones you don't really notice, unless you're specifically doing that for a reason. But I like for things to all blend in. And, we had an amazing team, amazing cinematographers, amazing production designers. It was just, and I think it really felt cohesive, all the colors and the palettes, and it felt very real to me.
Yeah, I do like that she was in white at the end, because it feels like, they're starting anew again, it's like a blank slate.
Oh, I like that. Okay, that's good. Because she wears so much color, she's so bold, and so crazy throughout the whole show. I think that was exactly it, just to have. And the same reason why we use gold at the end of the concert, it was kind of like the Phoenix rising. So there's a lot of symbolic, pieces that maybe nobody will notice, but obviously you noticed.
One of my favorite touches are Timothy Olyphant's scarves. So how did that come about?
Well, first of all, Tim, I've worked with Tim before, and Tim is hilarious. And he could really rock that whole 70s look. And he's super thin. He's got a great body. He was wearing the really tight pants and the boots and the big belt buckles. And he's just such a joy. I have to say all of the actors were a joy, but he was hilarious. So he would do anything. He had some flair. So he was great.
For sure. Well, lastly, what is your favorite Daisy Jones song?
Ooh, you know, we listened to all the songs, and probably The River, but we would just listen to them, and by the end we heard them so much, we were all just singing. Everybody knew the lyrics. The whole cast was singing. I mean, the whole crew, everybody, the Grips, Electric, everybody knew the words. So I love the soundtrack. I went to a restaurant the other day, and they were playing it. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, that's good. And I have to say, all of the actors are singing and playing their own instruments, and they did it live. So they need
to get the tour off the ground already. So,
I know. Okay, make a call, make that happen.
Well, Denise, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Kate Hawley, costume designer for the Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. This is such an expansive project and world. So where do you start? Is it just going back to the books?
Any opportunity, and in this case, so rich with text available, there's no excuse not to. So that was absolutely the first. I mean, I was already familiar with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but I wasn't familiar with all his work. So I read the Silmarillion for the first time, and a lot of the appendices work. And the Silmarillion is very extraordinary in its tone being so different. So it opened a new kind of way of looking at the world. We're very familiar with the Third Age, and so I got the chance to look at the First Age and understand the arc. So it was big, broad sweeps there, and familiarizing yourself with characters that sometimes span, say, 6,000 years. So it's a bit of work to do there. And then so big sort of looking at the themes of Tolkien. A lot of it's grounded in nature, and we did that with each culture. It became a unifying thing, grounding each culture and race in the materiality that they were born from and created, in the case of Tolkien, and it's all there in his writing and the poetry of his writing. So we literally had rooms not only with mood boards, but we had materials, textures, materials from the real world, things like pills and things on a table. We'd have areas for elves. So we're sort of mapping things out physically. We took quotes from his world, because at the time, script was still being developed. And we used his words to inspire a lot of descriptions for some of our races. And then, then it's working with it started off with a small crew and then became quite a big one. They would feed in things with materials and textures and sampling. And, from every aspect of the crew, we'd start testing ideas out. And we did a lot of it in-house. So, a lot of things were created and then measured against other races. So we're constantly looking at the cultures of our world and developing that with the showrunners and production design and everything like that. So it was, it started off in big sweeps, and then of course it gets down to the minutiae with Tolkien, and all the prehistories of them were part of that storytelling as well, especially Elrond's background and things like that. So you have a history of wars that are, you sit between two great wars in this world, and then there's fallen cities like Gondolin. So all of this has to be understood. And I'd have researchers and wonderful fellow geeks, but all my crew became familiar with that. And that's a tremendous commitment that they all read all the work and understood that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you do have to build these characters' history through their clothes too.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're thousands of years old. And also in the Second Age, they're prosperous and thriving. So how do you find that balance between original designs by reinventing the source material, and then also keeping in mind things that the audiences have already seen in the films in the Third Age when they're in their prime?
Well, I mean, when you take on a project like this and you go, oh yeah, shit, there was all that amazing stuff that went before. And all of us have a lot of my colleagues directly within the costume department have worked on the 3 films, or actually, and The Hobbit, so the 6 films, and some of which I include myself. And all of them have tremendous love for the work. We all have tremendous respect for each other's work. you know, my hat goes off to those films. They're extraordinary. And the craftsmanship that worked on there, but to work with a lot of that team again, you know, who are enthusiastic about exploring another element of Middle Earth, is particularly, you know, looking backwards to that history. So, but the key is that we're sitting in the second age and we're somewhere in the middle. So it gave you a different translation. You know, that Bayona talked definitely about the second age being the golden age of elves and dwarves. And then again, there's the sort of wonderful biblical almost and mythological events of the Silmarillion in the first age to look at, where elves weren't perfect and made mistakes. They just had the benefit of maybe, say, 6,000 years when we get to them in Lord of the Rings to learn and create the wisdom from that. And I think it felt important in some ways to sort of, I was asked by the showrunners to ground them, and particularly in the Northern Waste, when we see Galadriel on her question, that we used elves' sense of time and appreciation of beauty and in a very modern, almost interior design sense, that sort of imperfection, you know, so we showed age on some of the clothes, you know, as much as we could. And I think it's always a difficult line when you create a lot of breakdown and things, and then you're sort of balancing that on a daily level on set, and in this case in TV. So we tried to show a patina in that of aging, because some of these garments would have been worn for 1,000 years. So, you know, that was.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm also thinking about like the chainmail that a lot of them wear, especially like over their armor. It's like they've had that for forever.
Yeah, and I sort of don't think elves sort of throw away things lightly. You know, I don't think they're hoarders. But, you know, Elrond loves his artifacts and his books, and that's what we see of him in the third age. But he's on the beginning of that journey. And with the Northern Waste, they've been on that quest for 1,000 years. And I know, you know, there's what we call magic, however you define that, properties in elven clothing. But, you know, what is magic in this world? And you know, some of it's about the light. You know, we to balance that element of breakdown, we also use the breakdown in a way to create a lace effect through the chainmail. So all the team that were hand welding, that's why I kept it to a small group. It was only like, I think there was only about 8 in the Northern Waste or 10. So we could do this, but they hand welded and created lace out of the chainmail. And then we added all the pearls and diamonds back in. So they're just like beautiful ancient pieces of armor, really, that you might see in a museum or something like that. And that was the idea. And to give light, to keep using Tolkien's words, we sewed you know, the not real diamonds, but you know, the diamonds.
It's like shimmery,
just because like Tolkien described them as being born on shores of pearl and reflecting the light, or the stars in the sky, or the water. So we were trying to use that so that light could catch all of that. And we used went back to use quite a lot of old Celtic and Nordic references with the jewelry of the brooches and things, and they were made from pearls. But we wanted quite an organic feeling in this world. So, you know, a lot of that stuff has a little bit more of a, not rougher, but more elemental quality.
Well, a lot of the characters in the world, they're shorter or taller than they are in real life, like the dwarves. So how do you go about designing clothing to, you know, for the dwarves to like mask their real height? Yeah,
well, it's like with both the dwarves and the half-wits, you then get really tall actors next to really small elves. So it was a little bit of it's always a challenge, and again you blithely go, oh, this was done before, and then you have to go through the actual work and realize what was put into it to achieve that. And sometimes I work very closely with visual effects and with our production design, because everything had to be you know, echoed with whatever we did, they did, and vice versa. So there was a huge amount of collaboration on something as specific as scale, and it, you know, drives you balmy at times. But with the dwarves and that, it was first all about finding what is a dwarf's physicality, you know, in this world. They're humanoid creatures rather than, you know, they're not just your man up the road or whatever. So it was about drawing their bodies, you know, what's the physicality, ideally in a perfect world, what size would their heads be in proportion to those bodies. And also knowing that we had TV timelines and you know, pace. The showrunners, JD and Patrick and our producer Lindsay specifically asked that we didn't come up with something that would require 6 hours of makeup and prosthetics. So we had to help in that way. So part of it was about the casting, you know, finding amazing character faces in that world. And there was this huge elaborate chart that visual effects did about going, you know, this height is the perfect, you know, no one taller than this, and you know, that's all great. And then you go, but there's an amazing face there. So it was about trying to find individuals that we could enhance and create characters from more than anything. But we did lots of tricks to try and avoid building up, you know, having lots of fat suits and things like that. So it was about dropping waistlines visually and creating clothes. And I was looking at the world of the Nibelung and all the Nordic mythology for that. And a lot of those old classical garments from that world that Tolkien was looking at, or that those mythologies came from, lent itself to some of that. And then the proportions of things would change. For example, in the Harfoots and that, we created headdresses, and we spent weeks working out how big an acorn was before it became too big, or a berry, and we made all these things, and that's where technology comes in really well. We could do sort of 3D scans of fruit and then look at it and then cast it. But all those things that sort of helped suggest scale. We scaled details up a bit, because then we had to think how much smaller it had to be when we had our scale double. You know, so you might have all the armor that we did for the dwarven guards were made out of, we sculpted all these scales, a bit like sort of pangolin dragon scales, and then we had to do probably about 60 different sizes there, and then we had to make 20,000 each of those, and then we had to scale that lot down for the small guards. So you had to keep working back and forth to see what would work on different bodies. So it was a minefield, and needed a team, needed a really great team helping work that out.
Well, Kate, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. And see you back in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Donna Zakowska, costume designer for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. The 5th and final season jumps forward in time through the decades, the 80s and 90s. So what was your reaction when Amy Sherman-Palladino told you about these flash forwards?
Well, you know, I had a feeling something might be coming, but I was still a little bit shocked, you know, because we were, you know, so much had this image of Midge and who she was and her clothing. That, you know, it did take a sort of a moment, you know, of my talking to Rachel and just having a sense of, you know, where this character is going to go. And I mean, it was fun, but it was also, you know, it meant for us that now we were going to be departing, you know, from the series, and endings are never like your favorite thing. So, you know, it was something really we had to sort of tackle emotionally, I think, a little bit, especially Rachel, who really took it extremely seriously.
Yeah, well, because throughout the entirety of the series, Midge is chasing stardom, and we see in the future that she does become a huge star. So how do you dress her for that type of success that we only see in patches in the future? Like we still see her wearing like her shades of pink and red, but it's you reintroduce it in a different way.
Well, I think also it isn't just, I mean, as you begin to move forward, you know, the 50s and early 60s is such a sort of, flamboyant and like sort of very sort of enthusiastic clothing period. So as you begin to get into the 80s, 70s and 80s, it's difficult to find that same element, but you want to be consistent with the character. So it was a little bit of a challenge in a way. It's definitely about pulling back. It's definitely about being more of a minimalist, because I think after, you know, the 70s was, you know, not minimal, but then when you hit the 80s and 90s, so you really have to question the moment, you have to question the period, and you have to try to make it credible, because I mean, here you are dealing with one actress, and you know, really a lot about the makeup and aging the person, but trying to always sort of capture the essence of who that character is. You never want to lose them just because you're changing periods. So, you know, I think it's always about instinct. I always say this, everything is about your instinct in a way. And I really tend to trust my instinct. And when you're working with someone like Rachel, who is also a very instinctual person, you find the journey, and you find that path. The journey just speeded up much more than we thought it was going to happen. So.
Is there one of the outfits in the future timelines that was particularly challenging?
I don't think I think it wasn't particularly challenging, but I think like there's certain, outfits like when she visits her husband in prison, and like how you want to, in a way, sort of do something that has a sort of sedate quality, but again, you don't want to lose the character. I think the challenge is more the bigger picture. The challenge is more about her, spirit, naivete, innocence, and sort of just, bringing that to those individual periods. And I think it's like a bigger issue, really, than just a specific costume. Certainly the prison one was a little bit of a challenge, was how to make that boring, interesting 80s, all at the same time. 80s not being my favorite period, I admit to this, although there were some great things that happened, but yeah.
Well, in the second episode, back in 61, she starts her job at the Gordon Ford Show as a writer, and it's a whole plot point of how she needs to pick a sitting outfit instead of a standing outfit for work, and Susie ends up picking this outfit for her, and this gorgeous flowing flared red plaid skirt, and it's like this cute little jacket and a cap. So how did you design that outfit for, like, how do you know that was the right one? And there's like a whole chase sequence too through a train later.
No, I know. I think, in a way I was a little bit lucky there in that I had that sort of feeling about this outfit, and it wasn't even quite reinforced yet. I didn't realize that this was going to be as big a journey. I didn't realize she was going to be running around the streets, but I had this idea of what I called like, the red sailor, and so this was like her journey into the future and the other world. And then, found this sort of fabulous fabric, and somehow it all sort of came together with the scenes. But I think when I designed it, it's just about an instinct about how I thought this costume should work. And then as it evolved, and suddenly you see her running through the subway and sitting on the stairs and swirling around. But wow, I felt a bit lucky at that moment. That, because there's never time that somehow that had, mentally sort of come together in that way. I'll think about a sitting costume versus, that was something that came a little bit later in the script. It wasn't initially there when I designed the costume.
Interesting.
A little bit of luck.
It was because of your design.
Yes.
Well, I did notice that during the subway chase scene, none of the other passengers are wearing red. Like, she's the only one in red.
Well, after, I made that decision, okay, she's going to be this, as I said, the red sailor, the red sort of phantom running around in the subway. Then you have to, really, clearly say to yourself, nothing else is going to compete with that. This is going to be, a very strong visual moment. And then you use everything to reinforce that. I mean, that's the importance of extras, the importance of people that, the actors that are surrounding the principals.
In the fourth episode, we get to see Midge in a garbage man's uniform, because she does this industrial show, this musical. It's super frumpy, it's green, and it's originally meant for a man. It was fun seeing her not in really gorgeous coats and dresses. So what was it like designing that?
Well, in a funny way, like, we really love that. I liked it. Rachel loved that costume. People were really like, wow, this is, an amazing sort of coverall. I sort of based it on a 1940s coverall I had actually found. But I loved, the fact that it had a sort of practically Charlie Chaplin-esque quality to it. Because for me, Midge at her best is always attractive, beautiful, but there's always like this great sort of comic streak that is a part of the costume. And so, of course, of course, with something like that, which is really a coverall that is oversized and the crazy little hat, it sort of allowed that aspect that is always like some component of who the character is to really, come to the forefront. And I love those sort of clothes, actually, those, sort of crazy half clown, half real people.
Yeah, because it's like, it's silly, and the whole musical was silly. So
yeah. Yes, that's one way to describe it.
Well, lastly, it's the final season. So what was it like when you finished the last design for the series?
I think that, I've never been involved with the project this long, a little bit John Adams, that took about 3 years, but I had never been. So I think it was very hard for us to say, this is the last. Okay, so this is the last costume you're going to have. It wasn't just about the costume, it was about the fitting. It was about the great sort of interaction that I had with Rachel as an actress, and sort of our excitement every time we created a new costume and had a new journey or a new feeling or a new idea. So I think when we suddenly realized, wow, I guess this isn't going to happen again, it was more like the curtailment of the activity than actually the
Yeah, it's
costume.
like this is our last time in the fitting
That
room.
became
Yeah.
a thing for me, in a way. Yeah, it's a very odd thing. I've never felt that before, so it was interesting. Yeah.
Well, Donna, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. Obviously back in a little bit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Angus Strathie or Schmigadoon. You joined. Were you a fan of the first season?
Yeah, no, look, anybody singing a song is a very nice place for me to be. Yeah, I loved the first season. I thought, what is this crazy thing? I mean, it was filmed during the pandemic. I didn't even know it was happening up here, but yeah, I thought it was incredible. I think it was so refreshing and funny, and all the great things that we love in musicals and Broadway, and particularly that cast. I thought, this is great. And my second thought was, damn, why didn't I get that? So when the opportunity came to do the second season, yeah, I was thrilled to do it.
Mm-hmm. So what were your conversations with Cinco Paul like when you came on board? Like, did you get a whole overview of the season and what the musical numbers were, and what shows you guys would be paying homage to?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, it pretty much explains it when he said, well, that was the musicals of the 40s and 50s. And this is going to be the musicals of the 60s and 70s. And being sort of a musical fan, if you like, not that I know every nuance of every musical ever. I knew, I had, certainly a knowledge, or certainly, a love of a lot of those musicals. So, you already have a term of reference. And the conversations from that point on is, how much of it do you want? Well, how much are we referencing the musicals? Do we want a hint of it, or do we want a complete reproduction of it? So yeah, there was somewhere to start from, because we knew the base material, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, the first episode we have this, cabaret-esque number by Dove Cameron, just Jenny Banks. She's like a twist on Sally Bowles, and that's a gorgeous halter dress that she's wearing. So yeah, so how do you go about like putting your own twist on these iconic looks?
That was kind of the challenge, if you like, because you think, well, some of the costumes are so iconic from the original shows that it's sometimes hard not to think of something else without going completely other genre entirely. However, Cinco always wanted the costumes, not unlike the music, to parody where they came from, and you needed to have that immediate reaction to them and go, oh, I know who you are. I know who Sally Bowles is. I know she has to have a bob. And I have to say, she was the only bowler hat that we put in the whole show too. I didn't put too many of those on everybody. But, you find a way, and you just think, well, what worked about the first one? What'll work? And of course, Dove's a different girl. Dove is not Liza Minnelli. They're very, two beautiful girls. But, it's about making it suit her and fit her and be how she feels, but still give us that sort of musical parody. Parody was the big word, as opposed to copy, because of course you've also got Breathing Down Your Neck, all the folks from Legal who says, can it be the same? And quite a lot of the time we had to put drawings in front of them. So they go, are we going to be sued for this or not? You know, so, you know, that's what that was.
Yeah, I mean, like they're, you know, just creatively, like there are some ways that they got around it. Like, you know, Jane Krakowski, it's like a gender swap Billy Flynn.
Yes.
So, yeah, and those pantsuits and dress suits were gorgeous. Those pinstripe suits. So how did you go about designing those?
It was like, you know, it was going back to the Billy Flynn and the Chicago and going, it was easier because, you know, immediately as soon as it goes on someone of a different sex, it's a different costume, really, you know, and to legal, they're not going to, also they're going to say a pinstripe suit's a pinstripe suit. You know, nobody's got a thing, nobody's got a claim to that as such. And with Jane, yeah, and also Jane comes with her own vibe on it too, because not only is she doing the Billy Flynn, but she also wants the Velma aspect of Chicago, and you know, she had all those other influences too, which was really interesting, which came in more when she did her big show number. So yeah, things grow as soon, certainly with the actors after I've actually put pen to paper. So yeah, it gets its own vibe in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there seems like they're, unlike the first season, there's like distinct worlds in season 2. Like you have like the Chicago world, and then there's the 60s tribe, and those costumes were a lot of fun. So what went to those?
That was the tricky thing in the first Chicago. It was all characters that exist in this town, and they all had a similarity to what they were. With this, as you said, there are these 3 worlds, and I remember Cinco, I've heard him being interviewed saying, we have all these different styles of music too, or different styles of music. Are they all going to sit together? Likewise with Jamie and the set, and she kept those worlds quite separate. There was the Victorian world of the orphanage, there was the club, and then there was the out of town junkyard world of the hippies. And with the costumes the same, I sort of made them true to those characters and those worlds. And so when the characters actually intermingled or related to each other, we sort of enjoyed the fact that they may pop. For instance, when Cecily and Dove go to the world of the hippies, they're dressed in black. So they sort of pop against all the color of the hippies. And so I never thought there was a time when everybody should look like they're from the same world, because they're not. And that wouldn't be true to their sort of genesis in the piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do love Jenny's like fur when she goes to the tribe, and then when she falls in love with like Aaron Tveit, and then she changes her whole look.
Oh, exactly. All of a
Yeah.
sudden there's a couple of hippie costumes. Yay, okay, we'll do that too. So that's the fun, you know, and the fun of a musical too. You know, another song is an excuse for another costume, for sure.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite looks is so simple, but it's Melissa's tangerine dress in the 4th episode when they have dinner with Mrs. Caldwell and Dooley, and it really plays off of Mrs. Caldwell's yellow dress too. So what went into that design?
But surprisingly, that went through a few that was one of the ones that legal were at me with. Strangely enough, because Cinco came barreling into the office at one point saying, okay, I've had this great idea. Melissa comes across in Jenny's apartment the clothes that belonged to the dancer that was killed, and all of a sudden, and I think that dancer had an obsession with Barbra Streisand clothes, and went, oh, all right, Barbra Streisand clothes, great. So he wanted the costumes from then on Cecily to reference clothes that Barbara's worn. And so with that, you know, we took a lot of the looks or alter as it looks from On a Clear Day as inspiration for those. And that's where that orange dress came from. And it was adapted from, if you like, with the giant braitongs and things like that.
Who knew that would cause so much trouble? But there you go.
I think there's a not terrible. Apple is not terribly bad. We've seen worse. That there's just a paranoia about the legal ramifications, because there's been some nightmare stories in the past. So it's just something people like to keep their eye on, and you know, especially with this one, because my first thing of the whole thing is, how do you get away with this? How do you get away with
It's a parody. That's all you have to remember. It's a parody.
It's a parody. And I'm going, you know, but there were some things where, you know, they were a little sensitive about, you know, Frankenfurter, because it's such a known costume, even though the 100 of Frankenfurter costumes out there are all quite different. They were keeping their eye out on me, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well, Angus, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. And
Thank you.
Jacky Levy, costume designer for Ted Lasso. In season 3, we finally get an updated Richmond kit, which was done in collaboration with Nike. So what was it like to redesign this look?
It was great fun, actually. Because we had Nike on board, it suddenly became very sort of, it felt very professional. I mean, I think we'd done a professional job before, but it just heightened the kit. And, you know, when all the guys, all the footballers came in for fittings, you know, it just had that feel of being really real. So the collaboration between us and Nike was really good. Actually, it worked very, very well. We collaborated on you know, colors, and because we had we had a new training kit, so that all had to be redesigned, and we had a new home kit, a new away kit, and halfway through we needed a new third kit as well. So quite a lot of work.
Yeah. Was there a reason why there wasn't a kit redesign between the first 2 seasons?
I think, yes, I think the feeling was that because it was a first season, and you know, people were just getting on board with the show, getting used to the show. You know, it was becoming really popular, and I think it was thought that it was talked about a lot, but I think it was thought that the audience would like the continuity of the kit going into the second season.
And now you're established, you can do it up in season 3.
Yes. I mean, obviously, you know, football clubs have a new kit every season. But we just it wasn't me as much. It was Jason and Brendan decided to keep the same kit for season 1 and 2. And then, you know, season 2 obviously got much more established. So then we designed a new one for season 3.
Well, season 3 also has several new characters. How exciting is that for you when they bring new people on every year?
Oh yeah, really exciting. I mean, I love doing all the regular characters, but you know, we had a couple of really great characters.
Zava,
Zava
out of the world.
Zava in his Zava world, and Shandy and Jack. So, you know, plus, you know, other smaller characters as well. But it's always good to have a new character.
Yeah, well, Zava, he's, you know, this enigmatic like soccer star, and he was inspired by Zlatan Ibrahimovic. But he was at first. But then, you know, like all the footballers, they kind of take on their own persona. So, you know, it evolves.
you know, naturally, and with the with the collaboration with the actor as well.
But his off-field looks are just very memorable. Just, you know, especially the first time we see him, he has this like fur collared jacket, this Versace shirt,
coat. The fur
so
coat.
How did you go about conceptualizing his style?
Well, we wanted it to be memorable, but we didn't want it to be sort of comedy. You know, we didn't want it to be. We still wanted it to look real. You know, so not comedic or cliched. So you know, so I did start with Zlatan Abramovich. And then I met Max, and you know, and took it from there really. And the first costume was the, you know, the one that he arrives in, and I think it was written in the script that it was a fur. It had a fur collar. Anyway, so we tried on loads of fur coats, and this was the one that, and actually quite a lot of other more outrageous or flamboyant ones, but that was the one that really worked on him. You know, and the way he stands and the way he carries it also worked very well.
Yeah, he wants you to pay attention to him, and he stands out in a crowd. Yeah,
he does. He certainly does. Yes.
One of my favorite looks of his is when he's in Sam's restaurant and he's wearing the Anzava shirt. Was that written into the script, or was that a original design by you?
The Zava.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I don't think it was written into the script, but you know, it was discussed. So it had to be designed, and you know, so we sort of we decided on the gold print. Thought would suit his kind of his look very, very well, you know. Because
and that really tells you everything you need to know about him, like that. Sure.
Yes, exactly. He's there, you know, he doesn't have to say anything else. He's sort of arrived.
Well, in season 3, we also see Keely running her own business. Like you said, she has, you know, Shandy and Jack and everyone, and Barbara there. And, you know, her style has always been so eclectic. So what was it like kind of evolving her into a more professional look that is still Keely?
Yeah, I mean, we still wanted to keep it eclectic, you know, because we use things from, you know, designer brands to high street brands, plus mixing it with vintage and so on. So we still wanted to keep that sort of eclectic look of Keely, but we just wanted to bring it up a notch. You know, she's got her own successful business now, so she just, I suppose in a way, you know, we thought she might, obviously she's not going to look like Rebecca in any way or form, but she might have taken a little bit of influence from her. But we wanted to keep her quirkiness and her uniqueness.
Yeah, sure. Well, in the 10th episode, Phoebe gives Roy a red, orange, and yellow tie-dye shirt. And we don't see colors on Roy a lot. So how much fun is it when you do get to put him in colors?
That was, it was hilarious, actually. It was very, very funny. Yeah, especially it being so bright. I think Brett himself was a bit sort of overwhelmed by it as well. But I think it was nice because it showed it showed a sort of a softer side of Roy, you know, that he was
the
willing.
stuff he does for people he loves. So
Exactly, yeah. He was willing to wear that t-shirt, which must have
she wasn't
taken
even
a
around, so
lot.
it wasn't even like in front of her there. So
No,
yeah.
it definitely took him a lot of guts to wear it, but he definitely was going to wear it for his niece. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, Jacky, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You get to stay on because everyone's coming back. Welcome to our Meet the Experts costume design panel. Today we are joined by Jean Shannon from The Boys, Denise Wingate from Daisy Jones and the Six, Kate Hawley from The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Donna Zakowska from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Angus Strathie from Schmigadoon, and Jacky Levy from Ted Lasso. Thank you all for being here. Well, you often hear about the close relationship between costume designers and actors, and how you guys come up with new ideas and discover different ways to build a character during fitting. So what have some of your favorite actor collaborations been? Donna, you were speaking about Rachel Brosnahan earlier. Do you want to start?
Okay, well, yeah, I think without question, you know, that would be one of my favorites. And of course, it was over a prolonged period of time. I think Paul Giamatti, when I did John Adams, you know, 115 days of shooting, you know, every day with Paul in the morning. But I think it's, you know, it's special, I think, when you sort of have a great sense of harmony and a sense of a passionate vision with your performer. And there's something very elevating about it. I think that's what's great, when it feels, you know, elevating and like you are really, you know, on a journey together, and there's a togetherness to that journey, actually.
LJ, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what I love about being a costume designer in general is just the journey of discovery of finding a character with our actors, and specific to The Boys, and, you know, building superhero costumes. One of the things that's been really a fun part of that journey is we actually have a soundtrack that we create for our fittings with the characters. I talk with the actors ahead of time about who they think this character is and what music might, you know, sort of inspire this character. And because what they're doing is very physical, we work on physicality in the suit, and we make sure that they can move in it and that they can properly function, because it's not a large film budget where things can be, you know, cleaned up in post with, you know, CGI, although we do have an amazing visual effects team that does great work. I want to leave them to all the work they have to do and provide them with costumes that actually work. So one of the things that's been a really fun journey with all of my actors on The Boys is having this like great soundtrack that we move to, so that then when we go to camera test, and we go and present this character that we've created in the fitting room together to the rest of the project, they're just really comfortable in the skin of the character, and they already know how to move, and they have that sort of, you know, trigger mechanism of the music to get them in the groove.
That's awesome.
It's funny that you say that, LJ, because I did the same thing. I would have a full soundtrack, and every actor had a different soundtrack. And I blared music all the time, even when the actors weren't there, 70s music all the time. And
I love
felt
it.
I felt like it really got them into the character. And then when they would go do band camp, I gave them 70s costumes to wear when they were playing their instruments, so they could really feel what it was like. And
absolutely. And I give the actors their super suit boots to wear, you know, and we always come up with little bits for them to wear, that if it's not their actual armored elements, it's pieces that are like them, so they can feel it and really get a feel for it.
It's important. It's important. And it does help if you have that longevity like Donna was lucky enough to have, where you can really build a relationship. It's really difficult when you get an actor the day before they work or 2 days before they work, especially if you're on location, and you don't even have time to bond. You don't even have time to discuss who you think that the character is. And, you know, part of what we do is so psychological, getting into the character. And if you don't have time to do that, I don't think you really get to mine the character as well. So it's great if you can build those relationships.
Yeah, for sure. Angus, how about you? I mean, you have Schmigadoon musical. Did you guys just play the songs?
I can't say we played many of the songs in the workroom or things like that. Although, you know, because I knew the songs, full disclosure, sorry. So, but to that thing of working with the actor is, I feel too, that it's when they're comfortable and when they feel that we share the vision, that's when the magic happens. Because sometimes you go, why are they thinking about that? Oh my God, you know, whatever. And then they open their mouths and then the magic happens and you go, okay, fine, great, it's all working. Silly things like, oh, you know, I've got a split underside of a skirt, so my leg comes out. I bevel with my right leg, not my left leg. So we have to change the split. So it's all of that stuff. And it's the refinement of them knowing what their performance is, or how they particularly how they perform in a musical, that adds that other layer, like all the other ladies were saying.
Jacky, how about you?
You get well, I've been very lucky. I've done the three series, and so obviously I know the regular actors very, very well, and you kind of get a shorthand with them, that you know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So when I do my fittings with Hannah, for instance, and something looks very nice on the hanger, and she puts it on, and we know kind of immediately. Sometimes we'll just go, it doesn't work, but then we know immediately when something works together. And I think that's the beauty of the actor costume designer relationship, that you have those moments that when you're completely in tune with each other. I mean, it's the same with Juno, the same with Juno as well. We have like a shorthand of what we know works and what we know doesn't.
Yeah. Kate, how about you?
Oh, well, I mean, I share all of that, but also sometimes it's, we all go in with a vision of a character, and then, what I love is the unexpected. We had characters like Owain turn up, who's playing Durin, and, I had my vision of a dwarf, and we always think of them as sort of heavy set, sort of not the most sprightly things, and he literally pirouetted into the fitting and completely changed, where the center of gravity is for that character, and that changed, being open to what they bring, and sometimes it can be different, but that opens an exciting thing, and then the journey begins there. Or we'd have fittings of Benjamin Walker, who was more like Buster Keaton in fittings than the refined kingly elf, so it's sort of, it can be, sometimes there's a sort of a whole sort of slapstick that goes on in the fittings that as part of the play and discovering things. And it's quite hard to sort of have a play box in Middle Earth. What is it, Ramsey, my production designer, said there's no elves or us, but we do try and provide things to try and keep it feeling organic, and not too we're trying to sort of keep that journey alive and allow possibility and things to happen. And so it's a wonderful part of the journey, having the unexpected as well.
Love a dancing dwarf. So
yeah, it's amazing, so delicate. Great point work.
Yeah. Well, what are some details that you guys have put in costumes that viewers or the camera might not pick up or notice, but you and the actor probably think it really enhances or completes a look? LJ, you're nodding. I'm sure there's tons of stuff.
Well, that's because super suits are all about Easter eggs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we lay Easter eggs into every suit as heavily as humanly possible. And everything from a repeat pattern that looks sort of like chainmail, or like a tactical fabric, but then as you get in closer, you recognize what it is. And I'm like, for anybody that's watched me talk about The Boys before, I apologize. This is a repeat, performance here. But one of my favorite moments was when we were doing the camera test in season 1 of The Boys, and Homelander's costume is a repeat of Eagles, but it looks like a tactical sort of military fabric. And, you know, we were like shooting all day long with all of the characters together and doing all, you know, these great shots and whatever. And Erin Moriarty, who plays Starlight, walks up to Anthony Starr, who plays Homelander, and she said, "Oh my gosh, they're eagles." She's like, "I didn't see it before, and now I can't not see it," you know? And so, you know, the concept being that like the way that we design the suits, we try to be really understated so that it just appears to be sort of this sort of austere thing. But as you dig in deeper and you feel it, right? And I know all you guys that are with me here know what I mean. It's what you've all just spoken about in the fitting room. It's like so much of what we do is just, I have chills thinking about it. It's just, you get that moment of like, that's it. That's the winning thing, you know? So it's like, you feel those things before you actually notice them. And then when you notice them later, it's a fun little treat for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. Denise, how about you?
No, I just love that. I love all those little details that you're able to create. I think I'm always putting something in. I didn't go to fashion school. I was a psychology major. So again, everything I do is about character and why somebody wears them. And sometimes I overthink it and I do things that nobody's going to notice, but it's my own subliminal thing. And then when I tell the actor, she's like, "Wow, that's really great. What a great idea." But again, I don't know if anybody will notice, but I do it on every show. And but I think that what LJ is doing is really cool. And I think that there's so many fans that when they find that out, it's so exciting for them to be able to find those little, discover those little things. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful that you're able to do that and give them that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think everybody feels what you're talking about, you know, putting a talisman on a character is something that's more about how the character feels, or you feel when you're creating that character, that the audience instinctively just, it helps tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, and I do stuff as well. You know, my grandparents sold Native American Navajo jewelry and I inherited all of it. So I used so much of it in the show. And that was meaningful to me to be able to use something and carry that on. So I think,
I'm wondering where you got those amazing necklaces. Actually, I was like, she
just
must
hand me down. So.
That was a great source for those.
It was a good source, but that's a personal thing.
Well, Kate, what about you? Because you know, there's like such a rabid, you know, legendary.
Yeah, I wish we had all those jewels lying around. We had to make them, and you know, you have sort of things like, you know, there's huge descriptions of all of these jewels, you know, so it's like, you know, what star is the right star, and there's innumerable stars, you know. Every time I'd go, we'd talk about, oh, we need another star, what is it? And we go back, well, it's a star. And you know, so there's a lot of that. But we did something that we did for the Kingdom of Linden, because we sit between, you know, two great wars of the Cymrals and the War of the Rings. Instead of having swords in this court worn by the elves at their belts, and that we replaced the idea of scrolls. And I was looking at Edward Burne-Jones illustrations and things like that. So we took the idea of scrolls from the world of Gondolin and things and used that, particularly with Elrond, as a sort of metaphor for where they were in their time and place. But I wish we had a big casket of Middle Earth stuff. But that was one of the elements, and his cloak was, you know, the idea that was a piece of old heraldry that came from Gondolin, you know. And Robert goes deep into the history of Middle Earth. He'll come in, he's permanently walking around with you know, the Silmarillion in his hand, which I love and can be a great, you should see it in fittings. They stretch for, you know, we have an hour, and then sort of like someone comes in and goes, hey, it's 3 hours later, Kate, we need to move on. And, you know, so you have to get to know time with each of your actors as a management thing. But yeah, there's so much there. And you know, with the dwarf children in the world of Khazad-dûm, and that we made reference to the dwarven helmets and things like that. So we played and sort of built wherever we could to add meaning and create that sense of history to each character.
Yeah. Donna, how about you?
Well, you know, I was sort of thinking about, you know, because it was a little bit, you know, it's more clothing. I sort of became obsessed with like the inner linings of all the clothes.
Oh, nice.
And a lot of times I would even do watercolors, you know, certain coats. I had this sort of image that when it opened, you know, it was like being in a garden, or maybe, it could be a dark coat and then opens to a blood red color. So I sort of use the inner linings a lot as a sort of, poetic sort of tangent for me with the clothes. And I often felt when someone would put that on, especially Midge, that unconsciously, like that was having sort of an impact on her, a whole sort of romantic vision of the clothing. So the linings and all of those little inner things became really like it very important to me, actually. Got very excited by them. Actually.
I love the inner linings of jackets and coats. Yeah, it's something, like you said, like you don't really think about or even see sometimes unless they take off their coats on the screen. But
yeah, and especially true, that's the sort of thing in the 50s and 60s that people cared. People, when they created a garment, they also, did something special inside the garment. And so it's sort of nice to continue that tradition in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Jacky, how about you?
Yeah, I guess on Ted, I did it more with jewelry. Lots of the players came from different backgrounds in different countries. So, it might be Jan Maas, who was from Amsterdam. We gave him like a little a necklace that had the 3 little crosses of Amsterdam on, and I doubt whether it was hardly ever seen, but it made him feel it made him feel good about his character, that his character would have had something from Amsterdam. And the same with Danny Rojas. He always wore like a Mexican beaded friendship bracelet, and just little things like that. And I think you do, with characters, you do, you might find a piece of jewelry and have a backstory, but it might just be a backstory between you and the actor, but it just makes the character a little bit more rounded.
It feels real, yeah. And it's like go back to
like it might be something given to them by their mother or their father or grandmother or things like that.
Angus, how about you?
With Schmigadoon, a lot of the costumes were costumes with a capital C, and that's certainly because they were referencing that and so forth. But I did feel that what people didn't see is like underwear and things like that, and we always get obsessed with there's a corset under there, there's bloomers under there, there's all of that sort of stuff, which not necessarily everybody sees, but it certainly gives that performer a certain way of moving. With the dancers, of course, they're crazy fit girls who are quite happy to wear nothing, but we did that too. What I did find, mentioning Easter eggs, was quite extraordinary, was the amount of Easter eggs people found that we didn't really put in there, but they seem to like.
I love an accidental Easter egg. What
you just sort of go, oh, I've seen people talking about some of Cecily's outfits and saying, oh, that's from Funny Girl, and you're going, no, it wasn't. Oh, that's the orange dress that we mentioned before. It's the orange dress that she was on the tugboat. No, it wasn't that. But I think I just got into Barbara Streisand mode, and I was just churning out Barbara Streisand dresses. And of course, the Easter eggs that people didn't see, or the costumes that didn't. Of course, there are a lot of them. There were several frocks on Cecily that, we've all been down that road before. So
just a tight shot, that's it.
The tight shot, the 4 dancers' costumes in the back where they're seen in silhouette, and that's all. But again, the person on the stage wouldn't feel right unless the people behind them were in the same vibe. So it's all important. It's all about building this world. So you can't tell how everything's going to turn out.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap, but it was great speaking with all of you. Thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on all of your projects.